In this lesson, I'll give you an overview of our chapter on web apps and HTML5. As discussed on this web apps overview page in the API guides of the developer's website, there are two ways to deliver an application on an Android device. As a client-side app developed using the Android SDK, as we've been doing during this course, or as a web application from a server using web standards and accessed through a web browser. And there's a third approach, which is a mixture of these two. You can develop a client-side Android app that embeds some web pages using a web view in your Android app layout. In the next lesson, we'll look at the code for an Android app with a web view embedded in it. Figure 1 in this page shows how you can provide access to your web pages from either a web browser or your Android app with a web view. And notice a difference between the two. At the top of the display in the browser, on the left, you see the browser search bar. And at the top of the display in the WebView version on the right, you see an Android action bar. Now, you shouldn't develop an Android application simply as a way to launch your website. The web pages you embed in your Android application should be designed especially for that environment. You can also define an interface between your Android application and your web pages that allows JavaScript code in the web pages to call APIs in your Android application, thus providing Android APIs to your web-based application. In developing web apps, you need to consider how your web pages appear on different kinds of screens. And there are two basic factors to account for. First, the size of the viewport and scale of the web page. The viewport is the area in which your page will be displayed. When the browser loads a web page, the default is to load the page in overview mode, which provides a zoomed out perspective of the web page. You can override this for your web page by defining the default dimensions of the viewport or the initial scale of the viewport in your web page HTML. You can also control how much the user can zoom in and out of your web page. However, when your web page is rendered in a web view, the page loads at full zoom, not in overview mode. So it appears at the default size for the page instead of zoomed out. The second factor to consider is the device's screen density. The screen density, which is the number of pixels per inch on an Android-powered device, affects the resolution and size at which a web page is displayed. There are different density categories such as low, medium, and high. The Android browser and web view compensate for variations in screen density by scaling a web page so that all devices display the web page at the same perceivable size as a medium density screen. To provide the best visual representation on all screen densities, you should control how scaling occurs by providing viewport metadata about your web page's target screen density and providing alternative graphics for different screen densities, which you can apply to different screens using CSS or JavaScript in your web page HTML. This page on targeting screens from web apps provides a number of examples, descriptions, and sample code for various situations. HTML5 is the latest improvement in the markup language for structuring and presenting content on the World Wide Web and is the successor to HTML4. Its standard definition has recently been stabilized by the W3C consortium, and browser developers are now implementing HTML5 features in their latest releases. This HTML5 page on Wikipedia provides a lot of good detail on features and functionality. HTML5 improves the ability of web-based applications to perform many of the functions that were previously only available to so-called native code apps, such as the Android apps we've used in this course. For example, HTML5 provides built-in audio and video support. Some developers believe that HTML5 can offer alternatives to having to develop multiple versions of an app for the different mobile platforms such as Android and iOS. In theory, web apps can be written once and run anywhere. There are, however, a couple of significant barriers to realizing this objective. The first is feature access. Not all mobile device features can currently be accessed from a web app. The second is performance. Mobile device processors don't match the power of desktop and laptop computers, so applications such as games that are computing and display intensive often won't run correctly on mobile devices, especially smartphones. So the current best solution to this dilemma is to use web app capabilities, when appropriate, to supplement native apps. Some apps might rely entirely on the web, some entirely on native code, and some on a mixture. So that's our overview of the chapter on web apps and HTML5. Now let's move on to the next lesson and look at some code. In this lesson, you'll learn how to incorporate a web view in an Android app. The web view class is an extension of Android's view class, and it allows you to display web pages as part of your activity layout. You might display a single page or provide access to multiple pages. As we see in the document summary to the right, this page on the developer's website in the API guides provides detailed information on adding a web view to your application, using JavaScript, and handling page navigation. We're going to look at code in a sample app in the samples workspace. It's the web view app included in the working files Eclipse workspace. First, let's fire it up in the emulator. We'll highlight the package name and click the debug button. We see an instruction to click the link, so we'll do that. And up comes my website. We've linked to an entire site. I can pull down the navigation menu. We can click around to other pages, for example, Android apps. And this website is designed to adjust itself to various screen sizes. So it does things like creating the condensed menu up at the top. If we click on the menu drop-down button here, we see options related to web pages. Now let's take a look at the code. In the source folder, we'll open main activity. In line 9, our main activity is declared. In line 16, we use the setContentView method to initialize our display using the activity main layout. So let's take a look at that. Lines 3 through 6 define a scroll view. 8 through 11 define a linear layout. And within the linear layout, lines 13 through 16 define our web view with the ID WV1. Lines 18 through 21 define a text view telling the user to click the link to see the display, as we saw. Now back in the Java code, line 19 defines a MIME type for HTML text. Line 22 defines a web view variable. 25 gets the web view from our layout. Line 28 declares a web settings variable and sets it to our web view. Line 31 enables JavaScript, and this warning message here is just telling us to be careful about using JavaScript, but we're in control of the website, so we won't worry about it. Line 34 loads data into our web view, and it's in this statement that I'm linking to my website. Line 35 is a commented out alternative to an HTML5 web page that we'll be looking at in the next lesson. Lines 38 through 43 handle our menu. And before we leave the app, let's take a quick look at the manifest file. The element to notice here is that you need to include in your app manifest the permission to access the internet with a statement like we see in line 7. So that's a look at a basic use of WebView. In the next lesson, we'll check out an HTML5 WebView. In this lesson, you'll learn how to use the Android WebView feature to display an HTML5 web page, and you'll learn about some of the capabilities of HTML5. HTML5 is the latest improvement in the markup language for structuring and presenting content on the World Wide Web, and is the successor to HTML4. A complete exploration of HTML5 is outside the scope of this course. For a more complete understanding of HTML5, Infinite Skills offers a number of HTML5 courses. On the Infinite Skills website, shown here, we'll search on HTML5. And we see a number of options. For some HTML5 features, JavaScript is required. Infinite Skills also offers a JavaScript course, so if we search on JavaScript, we see it come up. In this lesson, we're going to focus on some code examples and look at using HTML5 from an Android app. We'll use the WebView HTML5 app included in the Working Files Eclipse workspace. First, let's fire it up in the emulator. We'll highlight the package name and click the Debug button. Select Android application. We see an instruction to click the link, so we'll click. And we get a graphic of an orbiting planet around the sun. This is created using the Canvas feature of HTML5. The Canvas feature allows you to create a bitmap graphic using JavaScript code embedded in your web page HTML. So the animation you see here is not generated using the Android animation capabilities we studied in our lesson on animation. It's generated by JavaScript code that resides on the server inside the web page definition and was loaded into our emulator when we clicked on the orbiting planet link. Let's take a look at the Java code in our Android app. In the source folder, we'll open main activity. Now, this is basically the same code we used in our lesson on WebView using the WebView app, so please review that lesson if you need to. Now let's take a look at the one statement that's different from that sample app. Line 35 loads the web page of the orbiting planet instead of line 34 that loaded the Don Cowan website that we looked at in the previous lesson. The reason I stored the HTML5 samples on the marketimpacts.com website is so that I can show them without the surrounding HTML code that formats the pages, as you saw in the WebView lesson. It's a difference in the hosting servers. Now let's take a look at the JavaScript and HTML code that generated the animation. There's a link to this demo and code on my website, donkcowan.com, and the home page is shown here. To get to the code, under Publications, click on HTML5 Canvas for Dummies. And when I wrote this book, I included links to all the sample code on this web page. And there are some 40 examples, and you can explore these samples to see more of what's possible with HTML5 Canvas. For example, if we click on the fireworks display, this app shows how you can use a variety of JavaScript techniques to produce some interesting results. For example, it uses a large number of variables set with random values within specified ranges to increase the variety and realism of the fireworks display. It also simulates real-world forces like acceleration, friction, momentum, and gravity in the behavior of the fireworks particles. The sample we're using in the WebView demo is 603, creating oscillating elliptical motion. And to access the code, you can click here to download it. See, it's downloading. Or you can click here to view it directly on a web page, and let's do that. And let's look at the display alongside of our emulator. And notice a couple of things. First, the orbiting planet in the emulator is moving more slowly than the planet on the desktop PC version over here. On a real mobile device, you're also likely to see JavaScript animations running more slowly than on desktop PC browsers due to the slower speeds on mobile devices. Second, you may have noticed that the emulator version is not moving as smoothly. You see, it just paused. Now it started up again. It's not moving as smoothly as the desktop version. This is really caused by the emulator. If you viewed the simulation on a phone, it would still be moving more slowly than the desktop, but much more smoothly. Now let's look at HTML5 code to display a canvas. In the working files, there's a file named canvasdisplay.htm. It displays a web page with a canvas area, shown here, which contains the name of the web page, canvasdisplay.htm. If you want to follow along, open this file using your browser. You can do this by clicking on it in your File Explorer. You should see the display shown here. Now right-click on the web page and click View Page Source. This code shows a simple pattern of HTML and JavaScript code to display an HTML5 canvas. It demonstrates the basics of how the web page fits together so you can understand the interplay between HTML5, JavaScript, and your Android apps. Note that the code for this HTML5 app will run on any fixed or mobile device that supports HTML5. Thus, you can leverage HTML5 and JavaScript code in your Android app without rewriting it for different platforms. But let's go through the code. Line 1 defines an HTML document using the doctype tag. Lines 3 through 22 define the header of the web page document. Lines 4 through 21 define the code script area. Lines 7 through 20 contain the JavaScript code. And note that the JavaScript code is contained inside the web page header and within the script tags. Line 7 defines the function that's invoked when the web page is loaded by the browser. Lines 8 through 20 are the body of that function and include our JavaScript code. Line 10 defines a canvas variable that links to the HTML canvas definition below using the ID canvas area. Line 11 defines a context for the canvas, and the context is used in subsequent code, such as lines 17 through 19, to apply attributes to the canvas and to draw on it. Lines 14 through 18 define variables and attributes for the canvas display. Line 19 does the actual drawing on the canvas using the fill text function. This is just one of many types of functions that can be used to draw on the canvas. Lines 23 through 34 define the body of the HTML page display. Lines 25 and 26 define a division of the web page that encloses the canvas. Lines 28 through 32 define the canvas area within the browser window using RID canvas area. Lines 29 and 30 define the characteristics of the canvas. Line 31 defines text that's displayed if the user's browser doesn't support HTML5. That completes our lesson on HTML5, a powerful resource for your Android development toolkit.